Hi everybody, this is Johnny. I'm going over the rubrics in this video. But first I want to offer you a couple ideas, some things that will help you do well by your tasks. You want to be working to meet all the requirements for level 3. In any of the rubrics you'll see that there's a level 1, a level 2. I just skip those. Don't even pay attention to those. You care about level 3 and you want to meet all the requirements for level 3. The other thing you want to do is look at what is required for level 4, because level 4 is usually just a little bit more, and getting a few 4s will make it so the other scores can be okay and that you will pass. So I've set out these as requirements, required elements. Consider these as necessary. Think of these as a checklist. So if you see these listed this way, this is a checklist for you. I wish you success. Rubric 1 is Planning for Literacy Learning. How do the candidates' plans build students' understanding of an essential literacy strategy for comprehending or composing text and the skills that support that strategy? We're always looking for level 3. Candidates' plans for instruction build on each other to support learning of the essential literacy strategy for comprehending or composing text with clear connections to skills. Okay, so this is the minimum. You want to try for 3. These are the things I say you should be doing. Build on each other. Lessons should build on each other. They should clearly support learning, students' learning of the essential literacy strategy. Clear attention to the skills needed to meet the essential literacy strategy. So you see the 3 here. Build on each other, support learning of the essential literacy strategy, and clear connections to skills. So there's 3 things you have to do here. But you should give attention to level 4 as well. Candidates' plans for instruction build on each other with a meaningful context that supports learning of, and this is not different, essential literacy strategy. But the next one is with clear and consistent connections to related skills. So you need to talk more about related skills to get to level 4. So to get to level 4, describe how your lessons build on each other with constant reference to the purpose of the learning segment. Address related skills in every one of your lessons, and that will take you to level 4. So this is rubric 1. Let's go to rubric 2. How does the candidate use knowledge of his or her students to target support for students' literacy learning? Level 3 says planned supports are tied to learning objectives and the central focus with attention to the characteristics of the class as a whole. This one's very, very broad. My suggestions: supports need to focus on what students need to meet the learning objectives. So what kinds of supports are you putting there, and make sure your supports are targeting the learning objectives. And the second part is, how does this help the whole class? Supports describe attention to the whole class. Very general, but there are 2 things you must do to get to level 3. You must do both of these. To get to level 4, planned supports are tied to learning objectives and the central focus. Supports address the needs of specific individuals or groups with similar needs. You'll see that with 3, you need to address the whole class. After you've addressed the whole class, you need to give attention to individuals or groups. To get to level 4, aside from describing how your supports matter to the needs of the class as a whole, give attention to, and then all the different kinds of students. Okay? And that takes you to level 4. So this is rubric 2. And this is rubric 3. Using knowledge of students to inform teaching and learning. How does the candidate use knowledge of his or her students to justify instructional plans? This is all going to be about prior academic learning and assets. So level 3, candidate justifies why their learning tasks are appropriate using examples of students' prior academic learning or personal, cultural, or community assets. And then they make some superficial connection to research or a theory. So these are the things that have to happen for level 3. I write, you need to have clear detail about your students' prior academic learning. Your learning tasks need to be tied to students' prior academic learning. So you need to say what it is, but you also say why the tasks connect to their prior learning. You need to give good detail about your students' personal, cultural, community assets. So you need to describe what they are. And then you need to give these assets attention in your planning and learning tasks. So 2 things for prior academic learning. What is it and what are you doing with it? Assets, what are they and what are you doing with them? And the last one, you need to say something about research tied to literacy. You want to treat this as having 5 things to connect to in order to reach level 3. To reach level 4, candidate justifies why learning tasks or their adaptations are appropriate using examples of, and you can see instead of it being an or here, you can do academic learning or cultural and assets. Here you need to do both, prior academic learning and personal, cultural, or community assets. And you need to make connections to research under theory. To get to level 4, learning tasks must be designed with prior academic learning in mind and personal, cultural, and community assets. References to research should not be just general education theories tacked on at the bottom, but research connected to your learning tasks, giving a justification for the choices you are making in your planning. Much more strength needs to be given to theory in this one. Rubric 4. Identifying and supporting language demands. How does the candidate identify and support language demands associated with a key literacy learning task? You want to do level 3 here. General language supports address use of 2 or more language demands. So you've got the function, the vocabulary, syntax, or discourse. You have to have at least 2 of them. But I'm going to suggest you address each of the language demands. Say something about supports for the language function. Say something about supports for vocabulary. Say something about supports for discourse. Say something about support for syntax. Do all 4 of these, because that will get you to level 4. Targeted language supports address use of vocabulary, language function, and 1 or more additional language demands. Okay, so I still am going to suggest that you do all 4. You must describe supports for 3 of the 4 language demands. You must address vocabulary. You must address language function. You can make a choice between syntax and discourse. You might want to do both. Discourse is probably easier to address than syntax. So this was Rubric 4, identifying and supporting language demands. The last one. Planning assessment, this is Rubric 5, planning assessments to monitor and support student learning. How are the formal and informal assessments selected or designed to monitor students' use of the essential literacy strategy to comprehend or compose text and related skills? The assessments provide evidence to monitor students' use of the essential literacy strategy and related skills during the learning segment. My suggestion, describe how the informal assessments give attention to the essential literacy strategy. Okay. Describe how your informal assessments give attention to related skills. So this is informal. These are the daily check-ins, visiting with students and such. Do the same with the formal ones, so that final essay that they write. Describe how your formal assessment gives attention to the essential literacy strategy. Describe how your formal assessment gives attention to related skills. Think about this as having 4 elements to complete. Okay? And you will definitely get a level 3. What happens with level 4? The assessments provide multiple forms of evidence. That's why you want to do more than one informal, one solid formal at least. So multiple forms of evidence to monitor students' use of the essential literacy strategy and related skills throughout the learning segment, not just at the last lesson. So that's a lot about the informal assessment happening in every single lesson, and you should, in your lesson plan notes, describe that informal assessment for each one. To get to level 4, describe more than one informal approach to monitor students' learning. You want to think about exit tickets, writing or reading conferences with individuals or groups of students. Think about informal check-ins during independent work. Describe how your formal assessment accounts for multiple aspects of student learning. And some form of assessment needs to be evident in every one of your lessons throughout the learning segment. So let's start with Rubric 6. How does the candidate demonstrate a positive literacy learning environment that supports students' engagement in learning? And I've broken this down. You always want to be thinking about level 3. So the candidate demonstrates rapport with and respect for students, and the candidate provides a positive, low-risk learning environment that reveals mutual respect among students. So I always break these down into necessaries. Think about this as a checklist. The first one says, show rapport with students, connecting with them about what they are thinking, sharing, and doing. This is rapport. Second one, show respect for students. Treat their ideas as having worth. Ask questions that respect that they should be challenged. Okay, so this is respect, rapport, respect. Next, describe what is going on in the classroom among students and how they are engaged in positive ways. So this is a positive, low-risk learning environment and about mutual respect among students. Describe how students are working to support one another's learning through mutual respect. So that's the bottom one as well. So I suggest that there are 4 elements to complete here. Use this as a checklist. To get to level 4, the candidate demonstrates rapport with and respect for students. Okay. Candidate provides a challenging learning environment that promotes mutual respect among students. So less passive, more active. To get to level 4, describe how you set up a positive learning environment, how you set out appropriate challenges for your students, and how you purposely set out opportunities for your students to work together to show mutual respect. For this is rubric 6. Let's go to rubric 7. How does the candidate actively engage students in integrating strategies and skills to comprehend or compose text? So level 3, students are engaged in learning tasks that address their understanding of, and notice this, essential literacy strategy for comprehending or composing text, related skills, and then it says candidate links prior academic learning to new literacy learning. So the focus here is on prior academic learning. You remember that prompt where we gave it really good attention. Okay? These are the necessaries for level 3. Remember, you have to hit all the levels 3 to get 3. Every one of these. So think of it as a checklist. Describe how students were engaged in the essential literacy strategy. Describe how students were engaged in related skills. So you see both of them. Because you see it's essential literacy strategy here, related skills here, you have to have both. Describe how prior academic learning was connected to learning what was learned in literacy. So this is this piece here. So 3 things. Treat this one as having 3 elements to complete. For level 4, students are engaged in learning tasks that integrate their understanding of, and you see essential literacy strategy and related skills again, but this is where it gets thicker. Well, also the difference is this one says address the essential literacy strategy and related skills. This says integrate, so that's the level up. For the second part about prior academic learning, look what goes on with level 4. Candidate links prior academic learning and personal, cultural, or community assets to new literacy learning. So that's the addition here. To get to level 4, describe how you embed and purposefully integrate the essential literacy strategy into your learning tasks. Embed and purposefully integrate the related skills into your learning tasks. So it's essential literacy strategy, related skills. Then it says link prior academic learning to new literacy learning, and then the addition, link personal, cultural, and community assets to new literacy learning. And that takes you to level 4. Let's go to rubric 8. How does the candidate elicit student responses to promote thinking and apply the essential literacy strategy and related skills to comprehend or compose text? So this one's pretty straightforward. Level 3, candidate elicits student responses to support use of essential literacy strategy or related skills. Pay attention to the or, to comprehend or compose text. Remember this is, or look at how this is focused on eliciting, okay? Involve students, this is what you have to do. Involve students and have them tell you and show you how they understand and use the essential literacy strategy. So telling and showing you is about eliciting, right? Involve students and have them tell you and show you how they understand and use the related skills. Even though it says or here, I think you should do both, okay? Treat this one as having 2 elements to complete. To move to level 4, candidate elicits and builds on, pay attention to builds on, students' responses to explicitly portray, extend, or clarify essential literacy strategy and related skills to comprehend or compose text. So the difference here in level 4 is not just eliciting, it's also building on. It's not just essential literacy strategy or related skills, it's essential literacy strategy and related skills. To get to level 4, focus on how you encourage students to show and tell you what they understand, and then how you take what they offer to clarify, extend, build on that understanding. You must address both the essential literacy strategy and related skills. So this is rubric 8. Let's go to rubric 9. How does the candidate support students to learn, practice, and apply the essential literacy strategy for comprehending or composing text in a meaningful context? So for level 3, candidate models the essential literacy strategy to comprehend or compose text with limited opportunities for practice. The word practice matters a lot here. So the necessaries for level 3, describe how you model the essential literacy strategy. Follow with describe how students practice the essential literacy strategy. Okay? 2 things, modeling and practicing. Those are the 2 things that have to happen for level 3. Both of those get strengthened in level 4. Candidate explicitly teaches students how to apply the essential literacy strategy to comprehend or compose text and provides opportunities for guided practice. So you can see the extension here. So explicitly means much more direct teaching, making sure kids really see and understand the essential literacy strategy, and then of course much more focus on kids doing something with the essential literacy strategy through practice. To get to level 4, do describe how you explicitly teach the essential literacy strategy. Consider, in this lesson I explicitly taught the essential literacy strategy by. That might be something you write in your commentary. Secondly, purposefully describe how students engaged and practiced the essential literacy strategy across lessons. Okay? Practice, practice, practice. That's the big one here. So you've got a model and you've got to practice. Just do it very explicitly and purposefully, and you can get to level 4. The last rubric for this task, rubric 10, analyzing teaching effectiveness. How does the candidate use evidence to evaluate and change teaching practice to meet students' varied learning needs? For level 3, candidate proposes changes that address students' collective learning needs related to the central focus. Candidate makes superficial connections to research and or theory. Collective means whole class. Superficial means you say something about theory. The 2 necessaries, describe changes that would make the learning better for the whole class or most students. And then follow with connect the reasons for your changes to research or theory. Treat this one as having 2 elements to complete. To take it to level 4, candidate proposes changes that address individual and collective learning needs related to the central focus. Candidate makes connections to research and or theory. So notice the differences. 3 is about collective learning needs, which means whole class. Level 4 is whole class and individual learning needs. The prompt sets you up for this one really well. Then instead of making superficial or just kind of thin references to theory, you need to make better references, more explicit, more thoughtful references to theory. So to get to level 4, add to changes for the whole class, changes you would make for individual students, IEPs, ELLs, challenge students. And then this last piece, use research specific to literacy, not just general educational theory. Use research to justify the changes you suggest, and that will take you to level 4. So that's rubric 10. This is rubric 11, analysis of student learning. How does the candidate analyze evidence of student learning related to the essential literacy strategy and related skills? Level 3 says, this is the level you want to work towards at least, the analysis focuses on what students did right and wrong, and analysis includes some differences in whole class learning. So based on this, these are some requirements to reach level 3. Your analysis should describe what students did right, what learning objectives did they meet. Your analysis should describe what learning objectives students got wrong, Describe what learning objectives students got wrong, did not meet, or still struggle with. That's pretty straightforward. And then the last one, the last piece here, your analysis should describe patterns of learning for your whole class and for groups. All right? They're not saying patterns of learning here, but that's the idea here. So treat this one as having 3 elements to complete. To move to level 4, your analysis uses specific examples from work samples to demonstrate patterns of learning consistent with the summary, and patterns of learning are described for the whole class. So for this one, it's all about patterns of learning. So let's start. To get to level 4, evidence. Give evidence from work samples that exemplify the patterns of learning that you describe in your analysis. Example, this pattern of learning can be found in, you can use this as a starter, focus student 1, 2, or 3's work here. Also, describe a pattern of learning for the whole class. That's the last piece here. This has to be a pattern of learning for the whole class. A pattern of learning I found for the whole class was, and that gets you to level 4. Let's go to rubric 12. This is, what type of feedback does the candidate provide to focus students? Focused on feedback here. And for level 3, feedback is specific and addresses either needs or strengths related to the learning objectives. Either needs or strengths. So you have a choice here, but you really want to try to address both. These are necessaries. Your feedback is specific, focused on your learning objectives, not just simple praise or about superficial features of their work. Your feedback addresses student needs based on learning objectives. Your feedback addresses student strengths based on learning objectives in literacy. Treat this one as having 3 elements to complete to reach to level 3. So level 4, just a bit more. And this, if you do all of these, you'll get to level 4. Feedback is specific and addresses both strengths and needs related to the learning objectives. To get to level 4, this is simple. Do both. Strengths and needs based on learning objectives. Strengths and needs. That takes you to level 4. Let's go to rubric 13. How does the candidate support focus students to understand and use the feedback to guide their further learning? This is about the feedback, and again, it's about understanding. How do you set them up to understand the feedback? How do you set them up, support them to use the feedback? So for level 3, candidate describes how focus students will understand or use feedback related to the learning objectives. So it's not asking for both, but you try for doing both. So based on that, you will need to describe how you will make the feedback understandable to your focus students. Just giving feedback is not enough. So how are you following up to make sure that they understand what to do with the feedback? And then you will need to describe how you will support your focus students to use the feedback. Okay? So that's level 3. Level 4, candidate describes how he will support focus students to understand and use feedback on their weaknesses or on their strengths or weaknesses related to the learning objectives. So notice that you have strengths, weaknesses, both of these in terms of feedback. In level 3, they didn't describe what quality of feedback, but for level 4, it's strengths or weaknesses. So to get to level 4, the emphasis is on how you support students to use the feedback you offered. Describe the guidance or follow-up you offer students as you give them feedback. And it's best to describe how you will follow up on both strengths and weaknesses. That's the main thing here for level 4, strengths and weaknesses. It's very plain in the prompt that you should address that. So that's rubric 13. This is rubric 14. How does the candidate analyze students' use of language to develop content understanding? So if we start here with level 3, candidate explains and provides evidence of students' use of, and you'll see that you have to do the language function and one or more additional language demands. So you have only one of these that you need to get to level for level 3, vocabulary or syntax or discourse. So language function and then one of these 3. So requirements, you need to describe how your students were engaged in using the language function. And I'm going to suggest you try to do all of them. You need to describe how students were engaged in using vocabulary. You need to describe how students were engaged in the discourse that mattered to the learning segment. And you need to describe how students were engaged in the syntax that mattered in the learning segment. So think about this as having 4 things to do. And these will set you up for level 4. Candidate explains and provides evidence of students' use of, so you have to do language function, and you have to do vocabulary, language function, vocabulary, and here you have to do either discourse or syntax. So in level 3 you had 2 requirements, level 4 you have at least 3 in ways that develop content understandings. To get to level 4, give attention to all 4, the language function, vocabulary, discourse, and syntax. That takes you to level 4. There's one more rubric. This is rubric 15. How does the candidate use the analysis of what students know and are able to do to plan next steps in instruction? All about next steps. So for level 3, next steps propose general support that improves student learning related to assessed learning objectives. Okay. Next steps are loosely connected with research and/or theory. So my suggestions, things to do: set out next steps for the whole class to improve learning based on learning objectives, right? That's a little beyond just general support. Set out next steps for your focus students to improve learning based on learning objectives. Okay, so this is more folks, not just something for the whole class. Set out next steps for IEP, ELL, challenge students to improve learning based on learning objectives. So more folks again, next steps for more folks. And connect your next steps to learning theory strongly. Okay, it says loosely here. So level 3 is very vague, kind of general support, improve student learning. It doesn't say for whom, and some loose connections to theory. If you do these 4, you'll be in a much stronger place. Treat this one as having 4 elements to complete. For level 4, next steps provide targeted support to individuals or groups to improve their learning relative to the essential literacy strategy related skills. Next steps are connected with research and/or theory. Notice that it's not vague here about who needs to have the support in next steps. You need to have targeted support, and you need to have absolutely clear connections to research or theory. So to get to level 4, be specific about how the next steps target some misunderstanding or need for individual students, your focus students, groups of students. Give good attention to connections to theory throughout, and that'll take you to level 4. So this was rubric 15. Let's start with rubric 16, analyzing whole class understandings. How does the candidate analyze whole class evidence to identify patterns of student learning? Let's focus on level 3 to start with. Level 3 is what you're trying to get to minimally. You have to meet all the criteria within level 3 to make level 3. And level 3 for this one, about thinking about patterns of student learning. For level 3, candidate identifies what students did right and wrong related to conceptual understanding and one of the other 2, procedural fluency or mathematical reasoning problem solving. So have to do conceptual understanding, but then either one of these 2. My suggestion is you work all of them. So here's what I suggest. Conceptual understanding. In prompts 1B and 1C, identify students' strengths in the math you assessed and what they got right. Conceptual understanding, prompts 1B and 1C, identify students' struggles in the math you assessed and what they got wrong. So this is right and wrong for conceptual understanding. Procedural fluency in prompts 1B and 1C, identify students' strengths in the math you assessed, what they got right. Procedural fluency in prompts 1B and 1C, identify students' struggles in the math you assessed and what they got wrong. So for procedural fluency, what they got right and what they got wrong. And lastly, mathematical reasoning problem solving in prompts 1B and 1C, identify students' strengths in the math you assessed and what they got right. Mathematical reasoning problem solving in prompts 1B and 1C, identify students' struggles in the math you assessed and what they got wrong. So again, what they got right and what they got wrong in problem solving. So if you were to do these, all 6, you hit all of these, but you also set yourself up for level 4, because look what level 4 says. Candidate identifies and explicitly connects patterns of learning, so this is where you have to talk about patterns, for conceptual understanding and the other two as well. So you want to try to do all of them. To get to level 4, emphasize patterns of learning in prompt 1C. I'll say that again. To get to level 4, emphasize patterns of learning in prompt 1C. So use that term again and again and again, patterns of learning. You'll see that patterns of learning is not described in 3, but is described in 4. So rubric 17, how does the candidate use student work to analyze mathematical errors, confusions, and partial understandings? For level 3, candidate uses evidence from the 3 focus student work samples to identify the specific student struggles, errors, confusions, or partial understandings. Okay? So this is looking at the student's work, and from that you're trying to identify the thing that they need to work on again in a re-engagement lesson. This is all about evidence. You need evidence from Focus Student 1's work that shows their struggles or confusions. You need evidence from Focus Student 2's work that shows their struggles or confusions. And you need evidence from Focus Student 3's work that shows their struggles or confusions. So think about this as 3. Address each one of them separately. I suggested writing a paragraph for each. To move to level 4, candidate uses evidence from the 3 Focus Student work samples to explain the student's struggles, errors, confusions, or partial understandings in relation to the related mathematical concepts. Okay, so this is about finding evidence to identify the struggles. This is about explaining their struggles. To get to level 4, you need to move beyond just naming the student's struggles. Describe what you see in the student's work that defines or makes the misunderstanding. And a suggestion for you, looking at this student's work, I believe that their misunderstanding comes from. So you're explaining what you think is going on with the student. So this is rubric 17. Just one more. Rubric 18. Using evidence to reflect on teaching. How does the candidate examine the re-engagement lesson to further student learning? For level 3, candidate uses evidence of student learning from the 3 student work samples to describe whether or not the re-engagement strategy was effective. Okay, so the pieces here are about evidence and about effectiveness of this re-engagement strategy. So evidence again, evidence again. I start with describe effectiveness for the whole group. And then I suggest describe the effectiveness of the lesson for Focus Student 1, what worked and did not work tied to teaching strategies. Describe the effectiveness of the lesson for Focus Student 2, what worked and did not work tied to teaching strategies. And for the last one, describe the effectiveness of the lesson for Focus Student 3, what worked and did not work tied to teaching strategies. Treat this one as having 4 elements to complete. Okay? Whole class and each of the focus students focusing on the effectiveness of the re-engagement lesson. For level 4, candidate uses specific evidence of student learning from the 3 student work samples to evaluate whether or not the re-engagement strategy was effective. And my suggestion here to get to level 4, set out descriptions of the math found in the work samples that plainly show how the teaching strategies were effective or not. Describe why you think the student came to a better understanding based on your teaching strategy. Or if they did not come to a better understanding, describe why you think this is so. So this is about the evaluation part, and the first is about specific evidence. Specific evidence, much more detail in regarding the student's work. And then for the second part, the evaluation, you're giving some description of why you think things came about the way they did.